Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the special meeting of the Community Relations Commission of November 20th, 2024. We're happy to have you here. I now call this meeting to order.
Ahora está reunión
Will
ahora.
everyone please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Para la Alianza de la Bandera. To the liberty and justice for all.
So staff, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Chair Sherry Boyles.
Present.
Bowles. Vice Chair Fitzgerald. She's absent. Commissioner Nugent.
Here.
Commissioner Kim. Here. And Commissioner Crowell is absent.
Okay. So we're going to be having interpretation via Zoom. Tonight's meeting will be available in English and Spanish. For those attending on Zoom, if you wish to hear the meeting in Spanish, please choose interpretation from the menu at the bottom of your screen. Interpretation at the meeting. For those attending the meeting live, we'll invite our interpreter team to come up and give a quick introduction now.
Chair Bowles, honorable commissioners, city staff, members of the public, Victor Hernandez, Spanish interpreter with On Point. Muy buenas noches. Les queremos dejar saber que se les proporcionará interpretación en directo, es decir, simultáneamente, de toda esta reunión en español, y para poder acceder lo que son los servicios de interpretación en directo, es decir, simultánea, usted tendrá que hacer clic en lo que es un icono de un globo en los controles de esta plataforma de Zoom y después seleccione su idioma, que sería el español. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
So we are excited to be here in person with options for those who choose not to be here in person to participate virtually. There are several ways to participate. For those attending in person, please complete a yellow request to speak form. We have some in the front and also in the back, and please hand that to city staff. To participate via Zoom, please click the link at the top of the agenda and you'll be added to the meeting. All attendees are muted by default. To speak, press the raise your hand icon and you will be called on at the appropriate time. To participate remotely by phone, call 408-638-0968 and enter the conference ID found at the top of the meeting agenda. If you want to provide public comment, press *9 to raise your hand. When called upon, press *6 to unmute. State your name and provide your comments. These options for public comment will remain available until I close the public comment period for that specific item. Okay, so on to the approval of our minutes. We will now move for approval of the minutes for the regular meeting of the Community Relations Commission of September 5th, 2024. Do I hear a motion to accept the minutes as written for the meeting of September 5th, 2024?
So moved.
Do I hear a second? Roll call, please.
Chair Bowles.
Yes.
Commissioner Nugent,
Approve.
Commissioner Kim, Commissioner Crowell, and Commissioner Fitzgerald are absent.
Okay, so the minutes are so moved. On
Through the
to,
chair, can we just take a brief recess? The interpretation services are not working as we planned. So can we just take 5 minutes just so we can get this corrected?
absolutely. Thank you.
Just to clarify, it's
Chair Bowles, we can go ahead and proceed now. The interpretation services technical difficulties were resolved.
Okay, thank you. So on to our public comment period. So this is a time when any person present may speak to any subject not appearing on this evening's agenda. Please submit a yellow public comment card to make public comment. If on Zoom, use the raise hand function and state your name when called upon. So do we have any speakers this evening? Okay.
Chair Bowles, we have no speakers via Zoom or in person for the general comment period.
Oh, I think, okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, so with no public comments, we will close the public comment period.
Chair Bowles,
Yes.
if I could interject, could you reopen the consent calendar just to ask if there's any public comment and then retake the vote on that? Just because we need to ask for public comment for the consent calendar.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I open the public comment for the consent calendar.
Yes, and then if you could just do the motion and the vote one more time after the ask for public comment.
Okay. Okay, so I open the public comment for the consent agenda. Do we have any public comment? Okay, I have a motion to close public comment.
And excuse me, there's no public comment, just
Okay.
to, right?
Okay, do we need a? Okay, so I move to close public comment then. Do I hear a motion? Okay, second? Okay, roll call to close public comment.
Mary?
Oh, may I have staff to call roll call to close public comment, please?
Yes. Chair Bowles,
Yes.
Vice Chair Fitzgerald is absent. Commissioner Nugent,
Yes.
Commissioner Kim, and Commissioner Crowell is absent.
And just to clarify, that was the vote to approve the consent calendar.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so with the approval of the consent calendar, we're moving on to the public comment period. This is a time when any person present may speak to any subject not appearing on this evening's agenda. So please submit a yellow public comment card found in the front and the back to make any public comment. If you're on Zoom, use the raise hand function and state your name when called upon. So do we have any speakers this evening for public comment? Okay, showing none. I do make a motion now to close the public comment period. Okay, do I hear a second? Okay, for roll call, please.
We actually don't need a roll call for
Oh,
public comment.
Okay, thank you. Okay, on to new business, item 1. So item number 1 is the Community Needs Workshop for the 2025-26 Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan. Staff will make a presentation, and then we will open it up for public comments. Just a reminder again to please fill out the yellow public comment card found in the front and the back if you'd like to speak. If you're on Zoom, use the raise hand feature. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to staff to provide the PowerPoint.
Thank you, Chair Bowles. My name is Rachel Horst. I'm the Housing and Neighborhood Services Manager here with the city, and I'm joined by Jennifer Mora, Housing Specialist. We're both pleased to present this item to you this evening, and we also thank you for your patience as we iron out some little wrinkles with regard to our interpretation and also using this big space. Thank you for joining us tonight. So let's get started with the Community Needs Workshop for CDBG. What is the Community Needs Workshop? The purpose of this, it's an annual exercise to identify the needs of our community for our lower income residents, for differently abled community members, for people who experience linguistic isolation. So that is people who may not speak English or they speak a different language and information may not be available to them in their language, for example. People who identify as non-majority groups. This encompasses a wide swath of our community, and we do this exercise to find out what the specific needs are and how CDBG can help to support all members of the community. Next slide. This slide explains where we get the money from. So we're seeing CDBG, that's the Community Development Block Grant, and this is a federal grant from HUD, or the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. The logo is on the right there. The city receives this annual entitlement grant. So this is an amount of money that we know that we will get every year. And we use those funds for services and projects in San Mateo's most vulnerable neighborhoods and also serve the entire city. Next slide. This slide explains the backdrop for this conversation. HUD requires that the city prepare a plan every 5 years. It's called the Consolidated Plan or the CON Plan. We submit this to HUD to prioritize programs and projects budgeting based on community development needs. So we're currently in year 3 of the plan period, which runs from 2023 to 27. The priorities that were identified in this current plan are shown here: affordable housing, public services, which Jennifer is going to talk a little bit more about in detail, street and sidewalk improvements, especially in particular neighborhoods of San Mateo, public facilities improvements, which Jennifer will also explain, economic development activities, and affirmatively furthering fair housing. Next slide. The annual action plan, as the name implies, is an annual activity. So every year we must submit to HUD a plan during this plan period that gives an update on the progress we're making towards the goals that we already put in our plan, and then plans for the upcoming year. So we're talking about 2025, 2026. So this meeting is important because your input helps us identify what our priorities are specifically for this next program year, 2025, 2026. This is a slide showing, and hopefully we can see it, or you can at least identify the part of the city that is the CDBG priority or target area. And this is defined by HUD as an area that has a certain percentage of lower income households, but also this definition takes into account other neighborhood conditions like infrastructure or the quality of the housing stock, things like that. So the city identified these neighborhoods, North Central, North Shore View, part of South Shore View, kind of running along Norfolk. So this is the target area, and 55% of CDBG funds go towards activities benefiting this area. But again, CDBG benefits has a citywide benefit. So Jennifer is going to go over the different funding categories for CDBG.
Thank you, Rachel. So there are 4 main categories we fund using CDBG funding. So the first one is community development, which we use for capital projects, public services for nonprofit service organizations, housing to fund for construction, repair, and or preservation of affordable housing, as well as economic development for microbusiness assistance. Through our CDBG entitlement, we fund community development activities such as street and sidewalk improvements and also community facility repairs. Specifically, one of our recent community development projects, we worked with the City of San Mateo's Public Works Department to do sidewalk improvements in San Mateo's CDBG priority neighborhoods. Because of CDBG, we are able to fund a range of public services. We partner with local service agencies listed above to provide services to our community members. For example, Cal Primrose for a drop-in food pantry, Samaritan House for food, clothing, shelter, and case management. And we also fund for services for elderly residents who need support when living in long-term care facilities. Here are more examples of the services we provide under the public service category, specifically for women and youth services. We work with CORA to provide legal services for domestic violence survivors and their children, Friends for Youth who provide mentorship for youth, rape and trauma services who provide services for abused children. Additionally, we also provide services for housing, a legal aid society of San Mateo County, who provide legal services for households facing evictions and or living substandard conditions. And we also partnered with Life Moves, who provide shelter and supportive services for families. Our third funding category is for housing services. We partner with Rebuilding Together Peninsula to conduct minor home repairs for low-income homeowners. Additionally, we work with Project Sentinel to provide fair housing services to our community members who are experiencing housing discrimination. Lastly, our CDBG entitlement can fund certain activities for economic development. So we partner with Renaissance and Upwards to provide training for English and Spanish-speaking businesses or business owners who start and grow their businesses in San Mateo. Moving on to our data in San Mateo, we see how the following data can support and determine what kinds of services and needs more attention by looking at their data trends. For example, San Mateo's population has shown a decline of about 3,000 people from 2020 to 2023, which could signify that people are moving out of San Mateo. And additionally, the average household size in San Mateo is 2.6 people. Now moving to housing, it is estimated that 42,000 housing units are in San Mateo, while 47% of those units are occupied by their owner. So the majority of the housing units are occupied by renters. And San Mateo has the second largest labor force in the county, followed by Redwood City. So San Mateo does have a lot of employment opportunities. As for age demographics, the median age in San Mateo is 39.4 years. In fact, one of the largest segments of the community are under 44 years old. However, we do have a large population of our elderly residents, which we do provide services through CDBG to help them. As for income, according to the American Community Survey of 2022, it estimates that 33% of households earn less than 100K. At the other end of the spectrum, 36% earn more than 200K. This leaves the median household income to be $149,000. And now I'll be passing it on to Rachel to go into more details about the median home price.
Thanks. So looking at these numbers here of median home price and median asking rents, we can see that income disparities that Jennifer just went over, they result in affordability issues for lower income households in particular. So the median home price of $1.6 million in San Mateo, under current conditions, current rates, after a down payment of over $300,000, a household would have to have a mortgage payment of about $8,475 per month, not including taxes, maintenance, and other costs. So that's a very large sum. And although these asking rents, which are not low, they represent the median, meaning that there are certainly rents above and rents below that. They are out of reach for many households, given the income distribution in our community. Next slide. This slide just shows where people are living versus where they work. And you can see in San Mateo, as Jennifer mentioned earlier, there are a lot of jobs in San Mateo, but it's not necessarily the case that those who work in San Mateo also live here. So we have a lot of daily out-migration and in-migration, including from places that are very far away from the city. Next slide. Just looking at the homeless count, this is important when thinking about CDBG funding. There was a dip, as you can see, in 2022. The homeless count is done every 2 years, and this year there was a little rise again. So homelessness is, of course, an ongoing challenge in the community. For language, next slide. For the languages spoken at home, this slide shows that a distribution of different languages spoken at home based on the census, that 51% of households speak English at home, but that means 49% speak something else. So looking at speak Spanish at home, it's 19%, or Asian and Pacific Islander, which encompasses many different languages, is about 14%. So when thinking about outreach or service providers, they need to be able to meet the linguistic needs in the community. Next slide. We show this slide on ambulatory difficulty just to show that it's hovering just under 5%. So that's about 5,000 people in the community who have difficulty getting around. It doesn't mean necessarily that a person has a disability, but as Jennifer mentioned, there are many elderly individuals in the community and also those who may struggle to access services physically. So this is another factor to think about when we think about how we deploy our CDBG funds. So next slide, arriving at housing issues. There's overlap here between CDBG and our other conversations on housing. These are known issues and continue to be issues, have been in past community workshops. Housing types. This was Jennifer's slide. I'm going to pass it back to you. Sorry.
Hey, Rachel. So yes, as Rachel mentioned, so we were looking at housing issues. So we were looking at housing types. So if folks are living in single or multifamily and or ADUs, also housing affordability. So we look at community members' ability to afford the cost of living here in San Mateo, displacement, and their connection to employment and community resources. Additionally, we also look at access for individuals with special needs. So going back to our purpose of this community workshop, we want to hear from you on how we can identify the needs of our community. So again, for our lower income residents, for our differently abled community members, and people who experience linguistic isolation, and additionally, people who identify as non-majority groups.
So this brings us back to you as the public. How would you prioritize or rank, if you will, these categories? You're not obligated to rank these in numerical order, but it can be helpful to think about what is highest priority and what might be lowest or relatively lowest. These are all, again, goals in the consolidated plan. Think about what services you would like to use CDBG funds for and within which categories. So that's what we're looking to hear from you this evening. Just to give a sense, in the next slide, of next steps. As I said, this is an annual process. So there will be other Community Relations Commission meetings, including those that result in funding recommendations for public services funding. This happens towards the beginning of, well, at the end of 2024, and I should say beginning of 2025. The Community Relations Commission will also review the draft annual action plan because that's where all of this feedback is ultimately leading to. And then the annual action plan will be adopted by the City Council in the spring. All right. That concludes our portion here of the presentation. So I'm going to hand it back to our chair.
Thank you very much to both Rachel and Jennifer for the excellent and very thorough presentations. We appreciate that. So at this point, I will now open it up for public comment to address the questions staff raised in the presentation. So I'm going to ask Rachel for, I guess, the quantity and also the names of the public commenters and speakers.
Yes, and Mary will be supporting us on this as well. How many comments do we have on item number 1?
So if I'll just give a second for anybody via Zoom to raise their hand. Item number 1? Is it item number 1? So I believe, just to be clear, David Carducci, you wanted for item number 1, and Carolyn Shepard as well for item number 1, Leslie Wambach for item number 1, and anybody else in the audience that I did not call as for item number 1 that is here for that item? No. So we have a total of five in-person speakers, and then we have 1 via Zoom. So this is a total of 6. And we usually go for 3 minutes for that many people. Is that fine with you? Okay. So our first speaker is Leslie Wambach. Leslie, oh, actually, sorry. Apologies. David Carducci, if you could step to the podium.
Good evening. Thank you very much. Thank you for your service. Appreciate it. And thank you for that presentation. My name is David Carducci. I am the directing attorney for the housing team at the Legal Aid Society of San Mateo County. Legal Aid Society, we are the lawyers for the people here in San Mateo County. Our mission on our housing team is to prevent homelessness. We try to keep people in their affordable homes. Evictions were bad. They're getting worse. In 2019, the last year before the pandemic, there was 1,120 residential eviction cases filed in court. In 2023, the first year after the pandemic laws went back to normal, it went up to 1,510 eviction cases filed in court. That's a 35% increase over the 2019 numbers. In 2024, it's projected to be about 1,660 eviction cases by the end of the year. That's a 10% increase over last year, which was already high, and totals about a 48% increase over the 2019 numbers. So it's hard out there for the tenants. What's going on? 85% of the unlawful detainers, the eviction cases filed in court, are based on non-payment of rent. So yes, the rents are too damn high for our moderate income, our low income, our working class families here in this city of San Mateo and the county of San Mateo. So what can we do? Well, one thing we can do is we can fund legal services like you have in the past for offices like Legal Aid and Community Legal Services of East Palo Alto and Project Sentinel. Because the eviction is a legal process. The landlords have to go to court and they have to get a court order to force tenants out of their home. Therefore, you need attorneys to make the court process work. And laws are only effective when there's enforcement of those laws. And so an agency like ours is out there as the enforcement agency for landlord-tenant laws on behalf of the tenants. What else is needed? Well, the problem is people are having a hard time paying their rents. One missed paycheck or a couple missed paychecks can set them behind. One car repair, one medical procedure can put them in the hole with their rent, and then they can end up in eviction court at risk of eviction. One example of a case, even where a tenant had the money, but was still ended up in court because she was late paying the rent. By the time the case went to court, the landlord wasn't backing down, wasn't going to give this tenant a break to pay the rent like in many of the cases, even though she was able to get it with some rental assistance funds through Samaritan House. We were able to go to court. We convinced the judge under a law that gives the judge a chance to give a tenant a second chance. And so by arguing that, we got the tenant a second chance. She was able to pay her share of the rent. In her case, she kept a below market rate unit. Does zero mean I'm done? Sorry. That's what it means. So appreciate your past support and would appreciate continued support for the work we do.
Thank you, Mr. Carducci.
Our next speaker is Mitch Spiegel. You can step to the mic.
Hello. How are you guys? Mitch Spiegel, District 5 resident. I'm also a renter. I wanted to talk a little bit about priorities. My big things for priorities really are around incentivizing. I love that they have improvements to repair housing, especially for seniors. I love that we're doing work to promote small businesses. And I would like to really see that funding directed towards things that incentivize housing, ADU development, and even creating stopgap funding similar to Redwood City. With all respect to the gentleman from Legal Aid Society, is that I've seen those legal aid tactics being used aggressively against housing providers, and the tactics used specifically target small mom and pop landlords. To the gentleman's point, if 85% of the evictions are because someone doesn't pay rent, let's not punish the owner of that property who hasn't received rent. Let's create an incentive for the city to say, hey, we can step in as a city does in public service to help stop that gap. That shouldn't be on the owner to do that. So I'd really like to see there to be opportunities where a person, similar, if they had an issue, could come to the city, could apply for some kind of grant funding to have that stopgap should they lose a job or should they need support. versus spending money on a company that's going to punish the owners or try to go after them in court, which we know is a very long and arduous process, especially here in California, where there already are so many tenant restrictions. So I would just like to see that incentivizing being done, again, to repair housing for low income, especially seniors, promoting the small businesses, and then incentivizing housing and ADU development. Then, as I mentioned, I'd love to create some stopgap funding so that we don't have to spend money on attorneys and can spend money on keeping people in their homes. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ellen Wang. Ellen, can you come up to the mic?
I'm still writing my speech. Hi. Hi, I'm Ellen Wang, and I'm a member of the Senior Citizens Commission. I do not represent them tonight. I'm happy to be here on my own. I'd like to know more about low-income seniors and seniors that are struggling in San Mateo. I don't know that information, and I think it would help the commission. I know you have a lot of statistics about all sorts of things, and if you have anything that could break down by seniors' age, that would be appreciated. Priority for me, as far as seniors would be one, fixing sidewalks and also home repairs. And if possible, if not just the neighborhood of the CBDG, but all over the city. And maybe the city itself could have a fund for low-income seniors all throughout the city for any repairs and also for fixing sidewalks. Thank you. That's it.
Our next speaker is Leslie Wambach. Leslie, you can step up. Sure. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Good evening. My name is Carolyn Shepard. I'm actually a resident of Belmont, but of course shop and dine in San Mateo. I'm speaking today on behalf of the extremely low-income population, which you addressed both in your presentation and your housing element report. And this population includes different circumstances for people that are living with. But I would like to address specifically the needs of those living with disabilities, primarily with mental health disabilities that require supportive housing residents that safeguard both their dignity and their safety. On a personal note, my husband and I adopted a little boy from the county who was born with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, a separate disability. My husband passed away, and I'm now caring for my 35-year-old son at home by myself. And he has cognitive and emotional issues because of the FASD diagnosis. And unfortunately, he's not going to be able to live completely on his own, managing life as a fully functioning adult. So he needs a permanent supportive housing situation once I'm no longer able to care for him or I'm no longer alive. So ideally, one that promotes community to prevent isolation. I'm also the president of a nonprofit called Solutions for Supportive Homes, which was formed by a majority of aging parents who are supporting their adult children with mental health disabilities, some in their homes, some in apartments or whatever. But our children are at risk of homelessness unless there's a permanent supportive housing to take care of them. There are simply not enough housing options available for our families in San Mateo County. We do have the homeless count, as was pointed out in your chart, and they need to be, and many are suffering from mental illness, and they deserve to be provided for. We have those with developmental disabilities. You have a number of families account in your housing element. But we have families, particularly, as I mentioned, aging parents who are taking care of their adult children, and they're not necessarily counted. Our children are at risk of becoming homeless unless the cities of San Mateo County, including San Mateo, include residential housing for this population. They typically receive SSI, which is an income of about $1,200 a month. It's clearly not enough to live on. But we are asking that you include those with mental health disabilities along with other disabilities in your residential planning. And ideally, this would be housing for mixed populations so that those with disabilities are not further isolated. So I thank you for this opportunity to share this very dire need. I think the motto of our parents is, where will my child live and who will take care of him?
Our next speaker is Leslie Wambach.
Hello, my name is Leslie Wambach. I am here also on behalf of Solutions for Supportive Homes, as well as a member of the Advocacy Committee for NAMI San Mateo County. I echo everything that Carolyn so eloquently just spoke about, and I'd like to take it one step further. I am an architect, I have development background, and I'm a former planning commissioner for the city of San Carlos. Now I am dedicating the majority of my time towards helping cities throughout the county solve this problem of a lack of permanent supportive housing. So we would like to present to you a vision of what we would like to see someday soon in the city of San Mateo. This is a project called the Kelsey Air Station, recently completed in San Jose. It is a 115-unit affordable housing project, which is disability forward. It's focused on meeting the needs of the broader disability community. It includes units that target income categories of 20% to 80% of area median income, and 25% of all of the units are set aside for residents specifically with a wide range of disabilities. This is where we need to go. This is where we need to go in every city up and down the peninsula. And it's really a shining star example. So I would just like to submit that. What we have learned in our research is that creating projects like this are difficult. They are not profitable. How can they be profitable? And in order to do it, a lot of work needs to be done before the affordable housing financing can be secured. Basically, a very substantial pre-development loan is required in order to get a project like this off the ground. In the case of the San Jose project, the city of San Jose and Google came together and created a pre-development loan along with a smaller portion of donated funds. But for a project of this size, we're talking about a $9 to $10 million pre-development loan. And the reason for that is that the affordable housing financing that funds these cannot be secured until site control is obtained, the project is ready for construction, it's fully entitled, mapped, and building permits are ready to be picked up. That's why it's very difficult to get these going. So what we're asking is for your help.
Thank you, Ms.
I'm sorry, we'd like to just work with you and meet with the appropriate person or department to see how we can help cobble together a plan to make something like this possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Wambach.
Our next speaker is Robert Pedro. Robert, you can step to the podium.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for your time tonight. And I just want to commend the City of San Mateo for doing a great job at providing a very wide range of housing options for its residents. I am a property manager, and I have the privilege of serving tenants and housing providers who wish to provide safe housing for those in need. I had the pleasure of touring Life Moves project in Redwood City, and it's an amazing resource for those that are coming off the street and transitioning into permanent housing. I know San Mateo has a Life Move site, and I would highly recommend expanding that program. It serves the neediest of the needy, and I think it gets people kind of a reset button to help get on the right track. Also, I want to commend the legal services. I mean, obviously, legal services are greatly needed and necessary. Regarding the stats on the evictions, I just want to make some clarifications. There were a few years there where there was a moratorium on evictions, so it only makes sense that once the moratorium was removed, that the number of evictions would increase. The other thing to consider regarding evictions, as we create more rental housing, there will be more evictions, even if it just stays at the same percentage to the rental housing that's available. So I think that the numbers, you need to dig a little deeper on the eviction numbers. I don't think it's a rampant problem. And as mentioned, 85% is for non-payment of rent. Also, one of the advantages San Mateo has with the wide range of housing, they can help expand the Section 8 housing vouchers to those that qualify. And that is a wonderful program because it provides the housing provider fair market rent. And I would love to see the city come up with some sort of program to help people fill out the application. Because what I found in my business is usually that's the stumbling block. They might qualify, but they're having a hard time applying, filling out the paperwork. So if there's some way we could reach out as the city in conjunction with the county to help provide services, maybe that's something legal aid can help with as far as helping people qualify for these housing vouchers. That really is one of the best programs. Also, real quickly, on another note, the state came out with a Housing for All program, which is an equity share. I know the city of San Mateo does have some affordable ownership housing as well. This program is slightly different in that they lend the down payment, they get it back when the property sells. So I would highly recommend that San Mateo look at the state of California Homes for All program and see if it's applicable here. Thank you.
Our next speaker is via Zoom. It is Laura Finucci. Laura, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, if you could just speak a little louder, that would be great.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm on full volume. My name is Laura Finucci. I'm the Director of Programs at HIP Housing. Just a comment about the last speaker. I want to make mention that HIP Housing's Housing Readiness Program team actually does help low-income seniors with completing applications for affordable housing and also the county subsidized housing rent cafe portal. So I just wanted to make that comment. I'm hopeful that the city will continue to keep affordable housing as one of the funding priorities for CDBG funding. HIP Housing, over 25% of the clients that we serve throughout all of our programs and our properties currently reside in the city of San Mateo. Last year, we received over 350 inquiry calls from residents who wanted to understand how to apply for housing. And we're on track to field over 20% more calls from residents this year about those matters. So we do hear a lot of themes from our San Mateo clients about their needs for housing. And some of those needs include long-term stays in county-operated shelters, folks needing to move because the landlord needs their space back for a family member, or the landlord has passed away and is selling the property. Of course, we continue to see rental increases, housing subsidies ending, landlords remodeling and raising rents, and folks that are living in overcrowded living conditions. There's been a lot of comments tonight about seniors and those, really struggling with their housing costs. UCSF does a study that 41% of first-time homeless individuals are over the age of 50. And older adults experiencing homelessness are more likely to have exacerbating health conditions, poor mental health, and increased loneliness. And they also have incredibly low incomes that make it nearly impossible to find housing they can afford in our community. So we hope that you will continue to support organizations that are doing the work to help folks find and maintain their housing, whether it's through programs like HIP Housings or Legal Aid or others like Life Moves that really address the root causes of homelessness and help our community residents find or maintain their housing. So thank you very much for your time.
We actually have one more speaker via Zoom. Lori Watanuki, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Good evening. My name is Lori Watanuki. I just wanted to mention that in listening to this meeting, this concept of having a stopgap program within the city would be very beneficial in the event there is an emergency situation for a renter. If you have some kind of a grant program of funding available for emergency situations that occur. I know Samaritan House does this, and they will give an assistance to a renter in the event of an emergency. And the other thing that was mentioned this evening that I thought was very important was the sidewalk repair, especially in equity priority neighborhoods. We have street trees, and unfortunately, there are impacts to sidewalks because of the street trees. We love our street trees, basically, but unfortunately, they do cause some trip hazards. And so for safety reasons, I think it's important to have the sidewalk repairs, and that's something that I just wanted to mention. I hope that you will take into consideration some of the suggestions that were mentioned this evening. Thank you so much for your time and for your service.
We actually have one more speaker with a hand raised. Fernando Pena, you can go ahead and speak.
Oh.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you for your service, first of all, and for all the other members of the commission for your service. My name is Fernando Pena. I'm the Government Affairs Director, excuse me, at the San Mateo County Association of Realtors, an advocacy organization fighting for the safeguarding of private property rights, the promotion of home ownership, and enhancing housing production. I want to reiterate some of the comments that were made earlier this evening by a couple of the gentlemen there regarding stopgap measures and working together to provide solutions for tenants. I think it's imperative that as you look at these programs, that you take the position that we're going to provide solutions and we're not going to pit tenants versus housing providers. And with that large percentage, 85% that was mentioned by the legal aid representative, it's imperative that we work to provide solutions for our members of the community and not villainize housing providers, and especially small mom and pop housing providers who are, working with their lifetime savings to provide housing for many of their tenants, many of whom have been there for many, many years, including for decades under market rates. And to penalize them and to be punitive would be a disservice to the community. So if you can just kind of keep that in mind in terms of let's work together, let's work for solutions, let's stop the villainization of home ownership and for villainization of housing providers. I think we need to work together to come up with solutions. The Section 8 housing voucher program that was mentioned, I think, is a really great idea. There's already a lot of resources available through the city and the county for tenants as well as for landlords. We need to do a better job of educating the population about what type of services are available, not just legal services. So thank you for your, again, thank you for your service and thank you for your time.
That was the last speaker.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Thank you for everybody who provided the public comment today. A lot of good information was shared. So seeing that there's no additional speakers, I will now close the public comment period. At this point, just going to turn it over to my fellow commissioners to see if they had any questions or any comments regarding this.
No questions, but I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who came out today. I think we're all really privileged to be in this room, and for those of you who are advocating on behalf of others, whether that be tenants or homeowners, I just appreciate your time today, and we'll really take into consideration everything that you shared.
Yes, very much appreciated the comments, the insights that you provided for us. San Mateo is a wonderful place to live, but we have problems, and we need to be addressing what are we going to do for people who cannot afford the housing that they're in? How are we going to help our seniors who cannot get the services that they need? So I think if we're going to get very serious about this, we have to sort of look at it and say, hey, we're going to, buckle down and really attack this problem. The commission, I think, can have a role in this, but it's also going to be the citizens that really help to bring this forward and help to provide solutions. There's solutions out there. We can't solve everything, but we really need the community to be helping us understand what we need to do. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much to my fellow commissioners. Again, thank you for everybody coming out tonight on such a blustery day to provide your feedback. As Commissioner Lee said, we are going to take it all together. A lot of good dialogue started today, and we're going to definitely continue this. So at this point, we're going to move on to item 2. So item number 2 is the community workshop on anti-displacement and tenant protections. Like with the prior workshop, staff will make a presentation and then we will open it up for comments. Again, just a quick reminder to please fill out the yellow public comment card found in the front and the back, and then please provide it to staff. If you'd like to speak, if on Zoom, again, use the raise hand feature. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our wonderful staff for their presentation.
Thank you, Chair Bowles. Once again, I'm Rachel Horst, the Housing and Neighborhood Services Manager, and I'm joined by Jennifer Mora, the Housing Specialist. And we're going to present to you on this anti-displacement and tenant protections listening session. Next slide. We will set the stage a little bit, give some background, and then invite you to give your input. This slide simply explains why we're discussing tenant protections or anti-displacement. And there are many facts available regarding both incomes and rents, which we discussed in the prior workshop. Here, we're really focusing on housing affordability and the lack thereof. So the data show that just under 17% of households spend 50% of their income on housing, while over 20% spend 30 to 50% of their income. This means that they are rent burdened. Rent burdened is defined as spending at least 30% of household income on rent. Median rent has also increased significantly. So from 2009 to 2020, we saw a rent increase of 41%. renters in San Mateo County, so this is county-wide, but the numbers are quite similar to San Mateo City, they would need to earn $62.83 per hour to afford the average monthly rent of $3,267, which you'll recall from the prior workshop is very similar to the average rent in San Mateo City. And this is 3.6 times the city of San Mateo's minimum wage. So many households are not earning this amount. And again, there is that affordability gap that we see affects some areas of the city more than others. In particular, we see geographically the southwest and northwest areas of San Mateo are the most affected. But of course, it affects the city as a whole. Next slide. So this slide, you will see again at the end in a new form, but this is just to have you think about this as we go through the slides. We want to hear from you broadly about your thoughts on housing issues in San Mateo. Think about or tell us about problems that current protections, which we'll touch on in future slides, that those protections do not address, and outcomes, housing outcomes that you would like to see. So that's what we're looking for, very broad, from you all this evening. Next slide.
So now we'll be looking at the state protections in regards to tenants. And in California, we issued a statewide law that went into effect on January 1st of 2020 called the Tenant Protection Act of 2019, but also called AB 42 for short. This bill provides specific protections such as a rent cap of 5% plus a local consumer price index, or 10%, whichever is lower. Additionally, this also provides protections for just cause evictions, so it protects tenants living in the unit for at least 1 year. Additionally, it provides protections for fault evictions, where it is required that the landlord provides a 3-day notice. However, no relocation assistance is provided. And for no-fault evictions, the landlord is required to provide a 30 or 60-day notice, and relocation assistance is required for at least 1 month of the rent or waive at least the last month of the rent within 50 days of notice.
Thank you. This goes over city protections on the books. There are 2 sections of code that we may look at that speak to displacement and relocation assistance. And those are Section 7.50, which is tenants displaced from unsafe or substandard units. This requires relocation assistance for tenants who are temporarily or permanently displaced due to city code enforcement activities. This means a code enforcement case where it's determined that the unit is uninhabitable. There are different requirements depending on whether it is permanent or temporary displacement, the amount of rent that is paid as relocation assistance, and there is also a right to return to the unit or to move to an equivalent unit if available. The other ordinance that is on the books is Section 27.14, but this is a very specific and old dated ordinance, redevelopment, relocation assistance, and what it speaks to is relocation assistance, but for a very specific area to low and moderate income tenants living within the downtown redevelopment project area, which is from a while back when there was still a redevelopment and redevelopment agencies. And it was only for tenants in affordable housing. So this is not a very operational section of code, but again, it is there and it speaks to relocation assistance. I will touch on briefly some of the areas that state and city protections as they are do not cover. And this is not to imply that city action could then cover all of these areas. Many of these are simply in state law, and so the city might be precluded from extending protections to certain exempt types of units. But just to get a sense of what the Tenant Protection Act is covering and what it is not. So I'll touch on the first bullet. new construction units or units built within the last 15 years are not covered. Certain types of housing, single-family homes and condominiums, or owner-occupied, smaller types of housing, deed-restricted affordable housing, housing that is already covered by a local rent control ordinance or just cause protections, etc. There are two bullets at the end here that we are highlighting because I will go over this on a later slide where we talk about our housing element. But tenants who have not been in their unit for a full year are not entitled to those protections that Jennifer went over in the Tenant Protection Act, or AB 1482. And also in the case of the city's ordinance, if there's a long-term code enforcement scenario or a code case, the ordinance doesn't really speak to that. So, and there's not a bullet here for this, but there are other areas that may be covered by the Tenant Protections Act where the city may wish to extend protections. And again, I will speak to that specifically on a slide when we touch on the city's housing element goals, policies, and programs. Jennifer's going to speak about what other cities are doing or contemplating.
Yeah, so when discussing about what strategies could work for anti-displacement, we have been studying what other cities in California have been doing to address displacement issues. And some initiatives that we have seen are, for example, landlord and tenant mediation, where a neutral party resolution on landlord and tenant disputes is facilitated, rental assistance programs, so emergency assistance for rental payments, fair housing enforcement, so counseling on fair housing laws, and also issuing a rental registry to monitor changes in tenancy and rents and also track rent increases. Additionally, some jurisdictions have issued a rent stabilization program, so a cap on annual allowable rent increases for certain units. And some jurisdictions have issued a tenant bill of rights, which contains a list of rights and protections for tenants. And also an eviction diversion program, where a combination of services that divert a landlord and tenant dispute away from a court judgment. There are many more other strategies that have been implemented, but these are some of the strategies that come up more frequently. And now moving on to the housing element. So this is the main reason why we're looking at anti-displacement and tenant protection issues. So it is one of our goals in our city's housing element that was recently adopted. So what is the housing element? It is an 8-year plan on how to address current and future housing needs. So additionally, in the housing element, it has been discussed that rising housing costs and displacement is a key issue.
Thank you. The housing element goals, policies, and programs. This is a section of the very long housing element that you may wish to review. It contains certain policies that speak specifically to the issues of anti-displacement or tenant protections. So I attempted to foreshadow this in the earlier slides, but here exactly as written is what is in the housing element. We have a policy H3.4, also H5.4.1. I will just read the policy, aims to expand tenant protections in a local ordinance to extend the measures of AB 1482 related to relocation, documentation, and right to return policy in eviction cases. So I won't go deep into each of the bullets below, but this is something that the city committed to as part of its housing element process. And so, yes, this sets the backdrop for our discussion as a starting point for our discussion, that the city and staff is moving towards making recommendations to the city council for what these policies could look like that build upon what is already in the Tenant Protection Act, AB 1482. And one of those is extending the protections to those who have been in their units for less than 1 year. Also, for getting specifically at the evictions due to substantial remodels, documentation required, potential right to return policy, Also, strengthening the enforcement penalty structure for to protect tenants who are in unsafe or substandard units. Next slide. The timeline for implementation of that policy is 2024 to 2026, and it's the same for this other policy. There are other policies and programs in the housing element that may be tied to this theme of anti-displacement and tenant protections, but these are very specifically anchored in that. Policy 8.36 is the other one, which is about facts and data collection and understanding the problem, right? Monitoring rental rates, eviction, and tenant displacement citywide. So another task that the city has committed to is to research options and best practices for a rental registry list, and to more generally work with local and regional partners to develop a means for tracking rents, eviction rates, and displacement citywide so that we can continue to understand, monitor, and track those trends over time. Pass it back to Jennifer.
Thank you, Rachel. So to further explore the impact on tenant protection policies in San Mateo County, we met one-on-one with local legal aid organizations, and we received preliminary input. And 3 major points that we received is that there has been an increase in cases from tenants living in exempt units from current tenant protection policies. And additionally, tenants who receive Section 8 vouchers or live in below market rate units are the most vulnerable to rent increases. One feedback that we received from these local aid organizations is that jurisdictions that have extended protections besides AB 42 have seen a dip in evictions due to substantial renovations.
So here we are at the end of our presentation, and back to this slide about community input. We invite you to share with us now your thoughts on housing issues in San Mateo, problems that you're aware of that current protections do not address, and we ask you to think specifically about the areas that we reviewed that the housing element is addressing, that here are summarized as expanding on protections of AB 1482 and monitoring rents and displacement, but includes more, as I showed in those slides. And what are the outcomes that you would like to see from this process? What's next? This is the first in a series of community meetings. We will continue to hold these meetings in addition to stakeholder meetings with key stakeholders in the community throughout this year and into 2025 or focus group meetings, as we may call them. So we're meeting with agencies that serve lower income households. We're meeting with nonprofit and for-profit organizations and with landlord and tenant groups to find out more information. And there will be additional opportunities like this one for community input in early 2025. So we ask you to stay tuned, but just as a preview, the Community Relations Commission meeting in January, we'll have another one of these workshops. And we're working towards a City Council study session in the spring of 2025. Until that time, we are continuing to research and seek input and understand the challenges as they are in San Mateo related to housing and displacement. Here's a way to stay in touch with us. Our website, we hope that you visit us there. Maybe many of you received notification already because you signed up for housing element updates, but if you haven't, please do. You can call us or you can email us at our housing@cityofsanmateo.org email. That concludes our presentation. So we'll pass it back to the chair to invite public comment.
Thank you so much to the dynamic duo team doing the double header of the presentations. Really appreciate that. So at this point, I will now open it up for public comment to address the questions Rachel and Jennifer raised during their presentation. If I can ask Mary for the number of speakers and their names, please.
Yes, if anybody via Zoom would like to speak, would you please raise your hand now so I can get an accurate count? And I just want to clarify, David Carducci, did you want to speak on this item as well? Okay, so it looks like we have 16 in-person speakers and at this point 2 via Zoom. Would we recommend a 2-minute for this?
Yes, please.
2-minute timer? Okay, so we will start with our first in-person speaker, David Carducci. If you can step up to the podium, thank you.
Thank you for hearing from me again. I'm still David Carducci with Legal Aid Society of San Mateo County, and appreciate the comments here today. You would think there would be some battle going on. The fact is, my favorite people in the world are good landlords who provide good housing, good affordable housing to tenants. Absolutely my most favorite people. Landlords who follow the law never hear from us. It's the ones who don't follow the law that hear from us. And solutions, we're all about solutions. I've been doing this 25 years. I've had hundreds of cases. Only a handful have actually ever gone to court. We always reach a settlement with the landlords and their attorneys. So we're all about solutions. And one thing we can all agree on, we want tenants to be able to pay their rent. Everybody agrees on that. So to that end, anything we can do for lower rents for tenants would be helpful. More subsidized housing, more subsidized programs. We can all agree on that. A lot of tenants need help paying the high rents. And more rental assistance funds. We've literally helped, again, dozens, if not hundreds of people with settle non-payment cases with help of rental assistance funds that are out there, some through our office, some through agencies like Samaritan House. So those programs are all excellent. So again, appreciate what you all do and appreciate all of us coming up with solutions for the community.
Our next speaker is Carl Eldridge. Carl, you can step up to the podium. Apologies, Carol.
So my name is Carol Eldridge. I'm the vice chair of One San Mateo, which is a community group formed in 2017 to work toward greater housing and racial justice in the city of San Mateo. So One San Mateo, in combination with a coalition of community partners that include Housing Leadership Council, the Peninsula Solidarity Cohort, San Mateo Climate Action Team, and the Latino Ministry at the Congregational Church of San Mateo, has been advocating for a series of proposals intended to prevent evictions and keep San Mateo renters in their homes. One of our proposals is to increase relocation benefits beyond the 1 month currently required by state law. 1 month of relocation is nowhere near sufficient to cover the costs associated with a move. San Mateo's condo conversion and demolition ordinances recognize this. They require that 3 months of relocation be paid. For the sake of internal consistency within the city's housing policies and to recognize the true financial impacts of a forced move, our coalition encourages the city to require 3 months of relocation for all no-fault evictions. We are here this evening talking about preventing displacement. The change we are recommending increases the possibility that families who are forced to move will be able to remain in the community, that they will be able to mount the costs of relocating to another place here in San Mateo, and for heaven's sakes, that they will not end up on the street. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Krista Hansen. Krista, can you come up to the podium, please?
Good evening. I'm speaking on behalf of the Peninsula Solidarity Cohort, which is a coalition of diverse faith leaders taking collective action for the common good. We represent approximately 20 different faith traditions and are united in our concern about the suffering caused by rising rents in the community. Our faith traditions teach us that we are to be judged by how we treat the most vulnerable among us. In the coming months, as the city considers expanding renter protections, it will have an opportunity to do something meaningful on behalf of those in our community who are most at risk and who suffer the most from the problem. Surely the most meaningful action the city could take would be to lower the limit on rent increases, which under state law can now be as much as 10%. In addition, measures could be adopted to help prevent evictions. It's important to realize that the injury caused by eviction can be quite wide-ranging and profound. It can undermine a family's financial, physical, and emotional health and damage its prospects for years to come. As an aside, the suggestion that we provide rental assistance to me seems like it is not really a structural change, but more of a Band-Aid. And it also puts renters in the position of begging for help. A structural change would be preferable. In recognition of the extreme harm an eviction can bring to families, and especially to children, the Peninsula Solidarity Cohort joins with community partners in supporting the idea that just cause for eviction should start on day one. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Claudia Hislop.
Hello, my name is Claudia Hislop, and I've lived in San Mateo for 20 years this month. And I'd like to thank you for the opportunity and for your service. My concern is about the vulnerability and the stability of renters in San Mateo. There are evictions, as some have already stated, can be very traumatic on many levels. For one thing, financially. And then people, they have to look for another place to live and usually can't find some place they can afford in San Mateo. So have to move elsewhere, giving up their, medical health services that they're used to, taking kids out of school. And sometimes, I know this is important to a lot of people, but people who aren't pet people maybe don't understand this, but pets are sometimes abandoned or at best rehomed. And that can be devastating, especially for the children, well, and me, because I'm a huge animal person. But so I'd like to see that from day one, people have the protection of just cause evictions, that there are no cause evictions, and that we don't have no cause evictions during the school year. And I would just want to add on a personal note, I've lived here for 20 years. I've been gainfully employed. I've been able to pay my rent. I want to retire soon. That's going to change my income dramatically. So I probably won't be able to stay where I live right now. Thank you.
Our next speaker is John Love. John, you can step to the podium.
Good evening. My name is John Love. I'm a San Mateo resident and a homeowner myself. I am also a member of the Social Action Ministry at St. Matthew's Catholic Church, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak this evening. As the city considers which actions to take in regard to renter protections, I want to encourage both council and staff to keep in mind the severe stresses that many of the mom and pop renters in San Mateo experience, often working multiple jobs to enable their families to survive, and in many cases, never having the opportunity to retire. These mom and pop renters deserve our consideration. They deserve the housing security that many other of us enjoy. I hope the city will adopt strong measures to help provide this. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Paola Arellano Rosales. Sorry if I made a mistake with that.
Hello, my name is Paola Arellano Rosales, and I am the Community Engagement and Language Justice Lead at Housing Leadership Council of San Mateo County, who is a nonprofit dedicated to advocating for the preservation and development of quality, affordable homes in the county. And I'm also a longtime resident of this county and briefly for a few years of the city of San Mateo before my family and I were forced to leave because of the high cost of rent. And I just want to mention that for years, the city of San Mateo at both staff and council have neglected the issue of renter protections. However, I'm very happy to see that in the recently certified housing element, you're now, requires that the council to address the issue seriously in the coming months. And I am pleased to see that workshops like this, right, and the efforts of the city trying to provide interpretation is very much showing the dedication to that. However, with that said, I think it's crucial that communities of color who have been very much impacted by the housing crisis here are included in these conversations, and that their lived experiences and insights will be vital to shaping the proposed solutions that will turn abstract data into real personal stories of struggle and resilience. And unfortunately, not seeing a lot of that here in today's meeting. So with that, I urge city staff and council to connect with organizations that are spearheading campaigns like Our Home that Carol briefly touched on, amongst others like Faith in Action and the Climate Action Team, who are not only in this room, but are actively connecting with the community to learn the need. So yeah, we hope that you take the opportunity to engage with us so that we can hear from our more vulnerable communities who are suffering the most with anti-displacement amongst other housing struggles. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Veronica Martinez.
Hola, buenas noches a todos. Mi nombre es Verónica Martínez, organizadora aquí en la ciudad de San Mateo.
¿Lo tienes escrito?
No.
Okay. Hello, my name is Veronica Martinez, and I am a member of an organizer here in the city of San Mateo.
Mi inquietud es cuál es el plan que ustedes tienen para hacer alcance e involucrar en estos espacios de escucha a las personas de bajos recursos, las personas más vulnerables.
My concern is what kind of plan do you have in order to involve people of low income?
Y las familias que viven las necesidades extremas sobre vivienda. Nosotros hemos hablado con cientos de familias y hemos escuchado mucho el acoso, la falta de reparaciones en los apartamentos, falta de protecciones para inquilinos.
¿Me permites? Yeah. So we have heard about different clients, different families, and we've also heard about harassment and lack of repair in the apartments and lack of protections.
Nos interesa saber que los que viven la experiencia de sus necesidades tengan la oportunidad que sean escuchados. ya que los pocos programas que existen no son suficientes.
Well, so once again, lack of protection for the renters. We would like to know for those people that are experiencing this type of need that would have the opportunity to be heard because there are very few programs that exist and are insufficient.
Y necesitamos un verdadero plan que funcione para escuchar a las familias de bajos recursos más impactadas. Realmente necesitamos un control de renta porque lo que existe ahora solo es un tope de renta y es algo que pronto expirará.
So what we really need is some kind of wave to be heard or to hear the families of low income who are really impacted in our community. Honestly, we need some kind of rent control that needs to exist right now because what is happening right now is just a little bump and not really something that is realistic and is soon going to expire.
Para tener realmente una vivienda justa, porque nuestra comunidad está realmente sufriendo. Necesitamos que tomen en cuenta todas las voces.
So really what we need is some kind of just housing. And really what we're urging you is to just listen to our voices.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Marciela Ruiz.
Through the chair, if I may. She's going to provide her comment and is going to pass over what she has written down, and I'll provide what's called a written translation in English after she's done.
Excuse me, we're just extending it for the last speaker in this one to 3 minutes, just so you know that there's a total of 3 minutes for these two, for the translation.
Muy buenas noches, mi nombre es Marisela, soy miembro de Fe en Acción, vivo aquí en San Mateo. Una de nuestras necesidades es en el lugar donde vivimos, son apartamentos viejos que se requiere reparación y los dueños muchas de las veces nos aumentan la renta, nos sacan para repararlo, pero ya no nos llaman para regresar. Y necesitamos que inviertan en abogados de vivienda para que nos puedan representar. Gracias.
Good evening. My name is Marisela, and I am a member of Faith in Action, and I live here in San Mateo. One of our needs is the places where we live. The apartments are very old, and they require repairs, and often they increase our rent, and they ask us to leave so that they can repair them, but they don't allow us to go back. And we need that you all invest in some attorneys for housing so that they can represent us. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Haiti Alvarez. You can step to the podium.
Once again, through the chair, she's going to provide her comment, and I'm going to provide you with a site translation after she's done.
Buenas noches, mi nombre es Aide Álvarez, soy miembro activo de Fe en Acción en la ciudad de San Mateo. Quiero darle las gracias por escuchar nuestras necesidades. Necesitamos una forma que supervise que las unidades de renta estén en buenas condiciones, que haya vivienda verdaderamente asequible para nuestra comunidad, que se otorgue una póliza que nos dé el derecho a regresar a nuestra vivienda cuando el apartamento necesite una reparación y no tengamos que quedarnos en la calle. Debemos mejorar la causa justa. Un control de renta local que no tenga expiración, ya que con lo que se cuenta ahora es un tope de renta y ya pronto va a expirar. Necesitamos ser escuchados de las necesidades que existen de nuestras familias más vulnerables, pero que no se quede ahí nada más, que realmente se actúe porque es una verdadera crisis. Gracias.
Good evening. My name is Aide Alvarez, and I'm a member of Faith in Action in the city of San Mateo. I want to thank you all for listening to our needs. We need some kind of form of supervised for these units that are rented out and to have them be in good conditions. That we really need some affordable housing in our community. To have some kind of policy that gives us the right to go back to our units or apartments whenever there's a repair done and not have to be on the street. We need to better this just cause. We also need a rent control, a local rent control that doesn't have an expiration, because the one that exists right now is just a little bump when it comes to rent control, and it will soon expire. We need to be heard of our needs that exist within our families, within our most vulnerable families. But let's not just stop there, because really we need to take action, because this is a true crisis. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Patricia Porras. You can step to the podium.
Once again, she'll provide her comment, and I'll provide a site translation after she's done.
Buenas noches, mi nombre es Patricia Porras, soy líder de Fe y Acción, vivo aquí en el condado de San Mateo. Ya por varios años me gusta mi comunidad, por aquí han crecido mis hijos, es una ciudad muy bonita, pero muchos de nosotros nos vemos en muchas necesidades por el alto costo de la renta. Yo en mi caso he pasado muchas necesidades por la vivienda. Es muy cara. Aparte, la mayoría de propietarios nos hacen reparar las estructuras, están demasiado viejas y no tenemos insulación. Muchas tienen cucarachas. Necesitamos fumigación y necesitamos muchas reparaciones. En los últimos meses me moví. Me rentaron un departamento de una habitación y la renta está muy cara, es de $2,500 y en muy mal estado. Todo el edificio necesita fumigación, está en muy mal estado, tiene polillas y ahora que se viene el frío no quiero ni imaginar. Tengo humedad en todos lados. Necesito supervisión. Una de las soluciones sería el control de renta urgente, una póliza de seguro que nos va a desalojar por hacer propiedad con el derecho regresa, ya que para mis hijos es un lugar digno. Que la ciudad exija a los propietarios que mantengan sus edificios dignos y seguros para los inquilinos. Y la póliza de ley Red Tag. Yo solo gano $20,000 al año y mis hijos necesitan un techo digno. Thank you y God bless you.
Good evening. My name is Patricia Porras, and I am a leader in Faith in Action. I live here in San Mateo for many years. I like my community because my kids grew up here. It's a beautiful city, but many of us are going through difficult times because of the high cost of rent. In my case, I have many needs because the rent is very high. And apart from it all, the majority of owners don't do the reparations or repairs in the structures. And these apartments are very old and they don't have insulation. Many of them are infested with cockroaches, and we need pest control. And then most of them need repairs. Last time that I moved, they rented out an apartment for me. It was just a 1-bedroom, and the rent was really high. It was $2,500, and it was in a really bad state. The entire building was. The cabinets were bad. There was a lot of bugs, and now that the cold is coming, I can't imagine having mold. So I need some kind of supervision. One of the solutions would be a rent control, and we urge you and some kind of policy to ensure us that we won't be asked to leave, whenever there's a repair being done, and to have the right to go back, because my kids deserve a dignified living. So I ask you to revisit this policy, the red tag policy. And I also want to let you know that I only make $20,000 a year, and my kids deserve a dignified roof over their head. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Our next speaker is Robert Pedro. Can you come to the podium?
Thank you again for your time, and I want to congratulate the city of San Mateo for getting their housing element approved. I know that was a huge lift and a bunch of back and forth with JCD, so really appreciate the efforts in getting that done. Obviously, that is the main solution, which is supplying more homes. The supply of housing is what needs to be accomplished. In regards to, sorry, I have some notes here. Education, I think, is the key regarding two key elements that a housing provider owes to a tenant. One is habitability. I think most of us are pretty up to date on that. The other would be quiet enjoyment. And so under tenant protections, sometimes we hear anti-harassment. Most of your anti-harassment provisions are actually provided for under quiet enjoyment. And there are several legal cases and a lot of protections already on the books regarding quiet enjoyment. So I would suggest a deeper education for the tenants and for housing providers around quiet enjoyment, and that might help with the anti-harassment. Relocation payments. The challenge with relocation payments is there's no means testing. As far as, do they really need the relocation payments? Is it a necessity? So that's something to look at. Also, if someone is having a hardship, a financial hardship, it's not necessarily the housing provider's challenge, it's a societal issue. So there needs to be a bigger net. There needs to be more groups involved with helping that tenant relocate. Not necessarily that just the housing provider. As was mentioned, some of the housing stock is old and dated and maybe even considered unsafe. And the only way a housing provider can make it safe and update it is by displacing that tenant while improving the property and making it safe. One more quick thing on rent control.
Thank you, Mr. Pedro.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jeff Lamont.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Lamont, and I am a resident of San Mateo. And I have, for almost 4 decades, been working with my clients to help them to get into homes, to own a home, and to build generational wealth. So a couple things I wanted to mention this evening is I'm glad to see that we're having some of these meetings, because my experience has been that a lot of the cities and the county as well have been not doing a very good job in outreach. I find that a lot of people are not even aware that there is statewide rent control in place. So I think that the cities, including San Mateo, need to continue to do a better job of outreach to let people know about AB 1482. I should also remind the committee here that a number of years ago, there was a rent control measure that was put before the voters. I think it was in 2016, and it was resoundingly defeated. A couple other things to take note of is that one of the things that we find is that rent control will typically result in decreasing the supply of affordable housing and actually will decrease the quality of those rental units. Because if the housing providers, which are primarily mom and pop housing providers here in San Mateo, are not able to charge market rents, then it's less likely that they're going to put a new roof on. It's less likely that they're going to repair the decks. And also rent control tends to disincentivize people to move from rent stabilized units. And it's also the disincentive for folks to buy a home, because if they're getting a really good deal on the rent, there's really no motivation for them to go out and buy a home. So the other thing that I also want to point out too is that as far as rental registries, I think there are some serious concerns with housing providers about right to privacy. So I think that housing providers would push back pretty hard on a rental registry. So those are a few things that I think that we should think about. I do think that getting staff to help people fill out the housing vouchers is really important, because there's benefit to tenants and to the housing providers. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Lamont.
Our next speaker is Kareem Saras. Sarak.
Good evening. My name is Kareem Saraf. I've been a resident of San Mateo since 1975. I am a licensed general contractor who builds ADUs. I'm also a real estate broker and housing provider and property manager who also advises other property managers on what to do. I'm also a fellow or former homeless person. In the early 2000s, I did a lot of couch surfing, and I am where I'm at right now because I tapped into my friendships and relationships that were available to me. You guys have a daunting task, staff does. I would support you and encourage you on continuing to do these workshops, as you said. Doing those Saturday morning breakfasts, those are a big hit. You have a great resource sitting here behind you in Zach. Zach, you did a phenomenal job on herding us cats when we had to pass a housing element and working through Thrive San Mateo, and getting the general plan approved. That was fantastic. We need to tap in those same resources, get everybody in the same room and talk to each other. Just simply talk to each other. It's going to take a series of these conversations, Saturday morning breakfast. I'm up for it. And getting the Latino organizations together. You don't have to bring your interpreter porque se habla español. Español es mi primer idioma. So getting HIP housing together on their same room with Legal Aid Society, with SAMCAR, with, I mentioned HIP housing, Faith in Action, right? So let's get everybody, one Thrives or one San Mateo, let's get everybody together and let's talk and let's just have a dialogue, a continuous dialogue. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mitch Spag. Speak.
Perfect. Again, thank you guys. Again, Mitch Spiegel, I rent in District 5. I just wanted to first and foremost, again, thank you guys for holding this tonight. It's really important that we get our folks to the table. I want to just encourage that we keep seeking preliminary input, keep talking to groups like realtors and property managers, and really bring them into the process early so we can get a holistic view. I did want to bring up a point quickly that many of the owners of rental property here in San Mateo, especially in Central, Shoreview, and Parkside neighborhoods, are people of color. Oftentimes seniors, often on a fixed income, veterans, disabled. So the idea that it's just, people who are, white and rich is again, not unfounded. I also want to look at the data a little bit. Again, one of the things that was mentioned was 3.6% of minimum wage. I would love to know how many, people over 18 or households are really making that wage here in San Mateo. I also wanted to look quickly at, with looking at the data of $3,000 a month, if we look at some of the things mentioned about, 3Xing that amount, that would be $9,000 that a housing provider would have to spend to pay for a tenant to move to somewhere else if they wanted to upgrade the home, make it more safe, make it more energy efficient. That's a ton of money. That's a ton of money for anybody to have to pay for somebody who was given notice in the kind of timetables that we've talked about. For the housing element, one of the questions was, how do we kind of align this with the housing element? I would love to see the red tag ordinance amended. I would love to see that amended so that the habitability issues that are judged to not be caused by tenants would fall under that. I don't think it makes sense to, charge a housing provider for damage that's caused by a tenant, whether it's mold or whether it's infestations or anything like that. I also think the more that we can reduce the risk of housing providers to fall victim to bad actors, the more supply we'll have and the lower prices will be. Thank you, guys.
Our next speaker is Reina Gonzalez.
Buenas noches. Mi nombre es Reina González y he vivido en la ciudad de San Mateo por 21 años y en el mismo apartamento. Estoy hoy aquí representando a mi comunidad latina de Iglesia San Mateo Unidos en Cristo, en común con Iglesia Congregacional de San Mateo. Hemos sido los más vulnerables en cuanto a las rentas tan exageradamente altas. Me siento triste y con una gran impotencia porque no hemos logrado nada en nuestra ciudad. Eso nos ha demostrado siempre que el dinero tiene más poder que nosotros los pobres, los marginados. Y les digo esto porque varios de nuestros amigos y compañeros de iglesia se han movido del otro lado de la bahía por no poder pagar las rentas en esta ciudad. Por la situación de que no han podido pagar las rentas. Nuestras autoridades no han podido hacer nada para poder parar el aumento tan excesivo de las rentas. Yo he tenido que tener 2 trabajos para poder pagar mi renta, que es de $3,500. He trabajado como cuidadora de niños por 23 años y también como cocinera. Solamente de esta forma he podido pagar mi renta de $3,500 más los biles que se hacen un total de $4,000. He tenido que trabajar 13 horas al día cuidando gemelos, cuidando unos gemelitos, ¿verdad? Para poder pagar mi renta y mis necesidades. Siempre he tenido que compartir renta con diferentes personas, la cual me ha sido un poco difícil, no me ha sido tan fácil porque como señoras siempre ha dado un poco de miedo. Pero afortunadamente ahora vive mi hijo, mi nieta y un señor de Perú que tiene ya varios años con nosotros. Sería fantástico que las autoridades de esta ciudad pusieran un alto a los dueños de apartamentos de no subir el 10% de las rentas, porque al rico lo hacen más rico y al pobre más pobre. Yo personalmente les ruego que se toquen un poquito el corazón y apliquen su autoridad en darles permiso que solamente suban el 3 o el 5%. Piensen en nuestra gente latina, como jardineros, cuidadoras de niños, limpiadoras de casas y así. Gracias.
Good evening. My name is Reina Gonzalez, and I've lived in this area in San Mateo for 21 years in the same apartment. I'm here representing our community, our Latino community, and we happen to be the most vulnerable in regards to the rents, which are extremely high. I feel really sad and really powerless because we haven't really done anything in our city. They've really you guys have really demonstrated that money has more power than poor people, poor folk, the marginalized. And I'm saying this because many of our partners and friends have had to move away because of the same situation. So our authorities haven't been able to do anything because of the excessive increase in rents. I've had to work 2 jobs as a nanny and as a cook for 23 years, for 13 hours a day, taking care of some twins. And I do this because my rent is $3,500. And along with my bills, it's a total of $4,000. And so I have to do this to pay this amount of rent. I've always had to share rent with different people, which hasn't been easy because as a lady, as a woman living alone, I've always been a little bit fearful of others. But fortunately now my son and my granddaughter and an older man from Peru live with me. It would be fantastic if our local authorities of this city would put a stop to the owners of apartments to not increase the rent by 10%, because it seems like the rich get richer and the poorer get poorer with this. And personally, I'm begging you to not and really look inside your hearts and apply whatever authority you have to only give them permission to increase 3 or 5%. Think about our people, the Latino people. Thank you.
Our next speaker is, and our last in-person speaker is Ted McKinnon.
Good evening to Chair Bowles and the commissioners. My name is Ted McKinnon. I'm a 25-year resident of San Mateo in the 5th District. I'm a member of One San Mateo and also of the San Mateo Climate Action Team. Lack of adequate tenant protections results in many negative consequences for the less advantaged members of our community. Among these folks are many of our teachers, first responders, and other essential workers, such as caregivers and workers in our food supply chain. Excessive rent increases and forced evictions result in many of these folks needing to leave our city for lack of affordable local alternatives, resulting in long commutes, often lacking viable public transit options and often facing economic hardship. These folks must rely on gas-powered vehicles rather than the far more expensive electric alternatives in order to participate in our local labor force, which, of course, we desperately need them to keep doing. The vehicles they can afford are usually much older, and older vehicles have degraded fuel economy, meaning higher greenhouse gas emissions, and are more susceptible to breakdown, potentially exacerbating our ongoing regional traffic problems. Lacking a protective shield from the rapacious market forces of our dysfunctional approach to housing, we subject our displaced tenants not only to economic hardship and degraded life through long commutes, we're also degrading our environment. For their sake and everybody else's, let's strengthen tenant protections. Thank you.
Our next speaker is via Zoom, Stephanie Reyes. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. My name is Stephanie Reyes, and I'm a San Mateo resident in the Bay Meadows neighborhood. I strongly support the city's housing element goal of preventing displacement and the housing element policies around strengthening tenant protections. I support all of the proposed tenant protection policies. Two that I'll emphasize tonight as particularly important are expanding the AB 1482 just cause eviction protections to tenants who have been in their units for less than a year, and strengthening requirements around substantial remodels. Many San Mateo residents are distressed by how many of our neighbors are falling into homelessness. The best way to prevent more households from becoming homeless is to prioritize prevention. Evictions are a common pathway to homelessness, and stronger tenant protections can help people stay in their homes. I'm also a member of the San Mateo chapter of SURGE, Showing Up for Racial Justice. As the city's housing element and tonight's workshop both make very clear, people of color are affected disproportionately by displacement. Implementing tenant protection policies to stem displacement is a key way to advance racial justice locally. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jordan Grimes. Jordan, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, good evening, commissioners and staff. Thank you so much for your time. This meeting and discussion is long overdue, but I'm glad we're having it now. The statistics shared tonight were and should be for all of us incredibly sobering. $62 an hour needed to pay the average rents here are frankly just not sustainable. We need to be building more housing to bring rents down, and thankfully the passage of Measure T will help facilitate that. But we need to do more. People, particularly our most vulnerable residents, are really suffering. Thousands of renters who comprise nearly 50% of the residents of the city are rent burned, paying more than 30% of their income on rent. More and more people are being priced out and displaced. We need to strengthen the tenant protections as required by our housing element. We really need to expand AB 1482 requirements around substantial remodels. And we need a rental registry to better understand what's happening in the market. The cornerstone of effective public policy is precise and accurate data. We don't have that right now, and we need it. So I look forward to continuing to participate in these conversations and appreciate your time this evening.
That is our last speaker.
Thank you, Mary. So seeing no additional speakers, I will now close the public comment period. At this time, and before I actually turn it over to my colleagues, I just wanted to thank everybody for coming out here tonight. This was a good starting point for this narrative. And I was really impressed to see the wide variety of people coming out, from realtors, property managers, licensed contractors, residents who are renters, the nonprofits, community-based organizations, faith groups, volunteer groups. This was a really great starting point, and I look forward to having more robust conversations about this. I'm going to turn it over to my fellow commissioners.
Also, my thanks, my thanks to everyone who commented, gave insight. What you're saying is very, very important. And as I sat here, some light bulbs went off of, hey, this is maybe a route we could take, or let's think about that. We've got a lot of work to do to begin to solve this problem. This is not a small issue. This is a huge issue for our town. And until we start wrestling on it, we're not going to get there. But I'm so pleased that staff has done the work to get us to where we are now, that we have the opportunity to hear more, to understand better, to debate policies, to look at things that we can do. This is a great opportunity, and I thank all of you.
just want to echo what my fellow commissioners have just said. I understand that many of these issues are really systemic and they're broader than what can be done locally, but to have you here and really fighting for local change, I think is really, really valuable. And again, we have really heard you tonight. We've taken copious notes, and we will keep everything that you guys have said today in mind, your advocacy as we move forward and try to address the housing issues in San Mateo. Thank you.
Thank you both for your feedback. So at this point, we're going to be moving on to reports and announcements. I did want to actually state something really fast. I know one of the speakers, I hope I missed, was it Mr. Saroff? It was Mr. Saroff. He was saying we needed more outreach and to have more people, talking. And so I just wanted to encourage members of the public that they can actually sign up for email updates from the city and get information about meetings like this and updates and events. So all they do is go to cityofsanmateo.org. Once you go on the main page, you'll just get a pop-up feature and you can select what type of information you want. So for example, you want to know about more of our community relations commissions, you'll get updates on this, or city council meetings, to housing programs, job opportunities, volunteer programs, you name it. A wealth of information will be at your fingertips. And so all you have to do is just to sign up. So thanks. Turn it over to my commissioners.
Chair Bowles, so before we go on to the next item, I just wanted to kind of reiterate, this was one meeting in a number of meetings in our outreach process, and there'll be additional opportunities for the public to engage, both our team individually, and then we'll have another session in January before the CRC, before we move to City Council for further direction in a study session. So definitely encourage all the folks, both here in person and virtually, to continue to engage and look out for more information coming in the coming months.
Thank you very much. Any other reports or announcements from my fellow commissioners? Okay, so seeing none, may I hear a motion to adjourn? Second? Okay, may I have a vote?
Chair Bowles?
Yes.
Vice Chair Fitzgerald is absent. Commissioner Nugent?
Yes.
Commissioner Kim?
Yes.
And Commissioner Crowell is absent.
Thank you all. The meeting is adjourned. Thanks. Thank you to our interpreter team as well. We appreciate that.